I was folding Emma's school uniforms when Daniel announced he had another business trip. He stood in our kitchen doorway, adjusting his tie with that familiar, hurried energy that always preceded his departures. "Chicago this time," he said. A 3-day marketing conference for the pharmaceutical company where he'd worked for the past 8 years. "When do you leave?" I asked, not looking up from the laundry basket. "Tomorrow morning." "Early flight." He moved around me to grab coffee from the pot, his cologne mixing with the scent of fabric softener. "I'll probably be tied up in meetings most of the time, but I'll call when I can." I nodded. Same routine as always. Daniel traveled at least twice a month for work, sometimes more. Client presentations, product launches, strategy meetings. I'd stopped keeping track of all the cities years ago. Boston, Atlanta, Denver, Phoenix. They all blurred together after a while. Emma bounded into the kitchen wearing her soccer cleats, grass stains already decorating her knees from morning practice. At 12, she was all energy and elbows, growing so fast I could barely keep her in clothes that fit. "Dad, can you drive me to Sarah's house after school?" she asked, hopping on one foot while trying to retie her shoelaces. "Sorry, kiddo. I'll be traveling. Mom will have to take you." Daniel ruffled her hair before kissing the top of her head. He did the same to me, a quick peck on the cheek that felt automatic, like checking items off a list. That night, I helped him pack while Emma finished her homework at the dining room table. He threw clothes into his suitcase with practiced efficiency, though I noticed he spent extra time choosing shirts and cologne. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off. "Got to look professional for the clients," he said, but something in his voice felt different. Lighter, maybe. Like he was looking forward to something. The next morning came too early. Daniel's alarm went off at 5, and he moved through his routine quietly, trying not to wake us. I heard him in the shower, heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, heard the garage door open and close. By the time I got up to make Emma breakfast, he was already gone. The first day without him felt normal. I drove Emma to school, went to my part-time job at the library, picked up groceries, helped with homework. We ordered pizza for dinner and watched a movie on the couch. Emma fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through, and I carried her to bed, thinking about how these quiet moments were becoming more precious to me. Daniel called that night, as promised. The conference was going well, he said. Lots of networking opportunities. His voice sounded distant, distracted. Background noise suggested he was in a restaurant or bar. "How's Emma?" he asked. "Good. Missing you, but good. She scored 2 goals at practice today. Tell her I'm proud of her. I'll make it up to her when I get back." We talked for maybe 10 minutes before he said he had an early morning and needed to get some sleep. I told him I loved him, out of habit more than feeling. He said it back, but the words felt hollow somehow. The second day followed the same pattern. Work, errands, Emma's activities. I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed with a text notification. Daniel's name appeared on the screen, and I smiled, thinking he was being sweet by checking in again. But when I opened the message, my world tilted sideways. The first thing I saw was skin. Daniel's chest, bare and tan from our vacation to Florida last month. Then I scrolled down and saw more. A hotel room I didn't recognize, sheets I'd never bought, and a woman's hand trailing across his stomach. Her face was partially visible in one photo, young and unfamiliar, with dark hair spread across the pillow. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. There were 3 photos total, clearly meant to be intimate, personal. The kind of pictures married people don't send to their spouses. I sat down hard on our bed, staring at the images until they burned into my memory. The timestamp showed they'd been taken less than an hour ago. While I was helping Emma with her math homework, while I was loading the dishwasher and thinking about what to pack for her lunch tomorrow, my husband was in a hotel room with another woman. The phone slipped from my hands and landed on the comforter. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think straight. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. This couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation, some mistake. But deep down, in a place I'd been trying to ignore for months, I knew better. The late nights, the extra business trips, the way he'd started keeping his phone face down during dinner. The signs had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos again. By 3 a.m, I was sitting in Daniel's home office, staring at his laptop. We'd always shared passwords, trusted each other completely. Or so I'd thought. His computer opened easily. Same password he'd used for years. Emma's birthday plus our street number. I felt like a detective in my own life, searching through files and folders that belonged to the man I'd shared a bed with for 15 years. The email account was where I found everything. Draft messages that made my stomach turn. Can't wait to see you in Chicago, sent to an address I didn't recognize. Last night was incredible, with details that made me want to throw the laptop against the wall. Messages dating back 6 months, maybe longer. Sarah Chen, that was her name. 28 years old, according to her email signature. A marketing consultant based in Seattle who seemed to be working with Daniel's company on some project I'd never heard him mention. The messages revealed a pattern. Trips that coincided with her schedule. Meetings that were really dates. Business dinners that lasted until breakfast. I scrolled through hotel confirmations he'd forwarded to her. The Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, the Fairmont in San Francisco, the Four Seasons in New York. Places we'd never stayed together. Rooms he'd paid for with credit cards I didn't know existed. Each receipt felt like a punch to the gut. The worst part was reading how he wrote to her. Playful, romantic, alive, in a way he hadn't been with me in years. He called her beautiful, told her she made him feel young again, promised her trips to Paris and weekend getaways to Napa Valley. All the things he'd stopped saying to me, stopped planning for us. I found photos she'd sent him too. Not just the intimate ones, but pictures from their dates. Dinner at expensive restaurants, walks along the waterfront, her laughing at something he'd said. In every image, she looked radiant, happy, completely unaware that the man taking these photos had a wife at home doing his laundry, and a daughter who wondered why daddy was always working. There were financial records hidden in a folder labeled tax documents, a separate checking account I'd never seen statements for, credit cards in his name only, even what looked like the beginning of investment accounts that didn't include me. He wasn't just cheating emotionally and physically. He was planning an exit strategy, building a financial life that didn't include Emma and me. My hands moved mechanically, screenshot after screenshot, saving everything to a flash drive I'd found in his desk drawer. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, and somehow still unbelievable. This was my husband. The man who'd held my hand during labor, who'd taught Emma to ride a bike, who still kissed me goodbye every morning. Or had he stopped doing that? When was the last time he'd really looked at me, really seen me? I tried to remember the last time we'd made love, not just gone through the motions. The last time he'd asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. The last time he'd suggested we do something together, just the two of us. I kept digging. Found restaurant receipts from cities where he'd claimed to be in boring conference rooms all day. Hotel spa treatments, expensive wine, flowers delivered to addresses I didn't recognize. He'd been living a completely different life, one where he was the exciting boyfriend instead of the tired husband. The sun was coming up by the time I finished. Emma would be awake soon, needing breakfast, and help finding her science project. I had to pretend everything was normal, had to get through another day of being the wife who didn't know her husband was a stranger. But something had shifted inside me during those dark hours. The numbness from the night before was hardening into something sharper, clearer. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to beg or scream or make this easy for him. Daniel thought he was so clever, so careful with his secret life. He had no idea what I was capable of when cornered. I made coffee with steady hands, deleted my search history, and closed his laptop exactly how I'd found it. Emma appeared in the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and yesterday's t-shirt, asking if we had any Pop-Tarts left. "We do," I said, kissing the top of her head like every other morning. "But how about I make you pancakes instead?" She lit up at the suggestion, and for a moment everything felt almost normal, almost like my world hadn't just completely changed. But as I mixed batter and listened to her chatter about school, I was already planning, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Daniel had taught me something valuable without meaning to. He'd shown me exactly how to live a double life. The divorce lawyer's office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. Margaret Peterson had been recommended by my friend Lisa, who'd used her during her own messy split 3 years ago. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and direct. the kind of woman who probably terrified men like Daniel in courtrooms. "What you've brought me is very thorough," Margaret said, flipping through the printed emails and financial records I'd compiled. "Your husband's been sloppy, which works in your favor. These hidden accounts, the separate credit cards, this is financial infidelity alongside the obvious betrayal." I sat across from her mahogany desk, feeling strangely calm. "What are my options?" "Several. California is a community property state, so you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. But given the evidence of his deception, we can push for more. The separate accounts he's been funding, for instance. That money came from somewhere, likely from joint income that should have been disclosed." She explained the process while I took notes. Temporary spousal support, child custody arrangements, division of assets. It all felt surreal, like planning someone else's life, but I needed to understand every detail, every advantage I could claim. "I want to be smart about this," I told her. "I don't want him to see it coming until it's too late to hide anything else." Margaret smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "I like clients who think strategically. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. During the day, I was still Emma's mom and Daniel's dutiful wife. I made dinner reservations for when he returned, planned a weekend trip to visit his parents, even bought him a new shirt I thought he'd like. But underneath, I was documenting everything. I opened my own checking account at a different bank using my maiden name. Started direct depositing my library paychecks there instead of our joint account. The amounts were small, but Margaret had advised me to establish financial independence early. I also began collecting documents Daniel thought were safely hidden. His passport, birth certificate, social security card. I made copies of everything and stored them in a safety deposit box at my new bank. If he decided to run, I wanted to make sure he couldn't disappear completely. The hardest part was acting normal when he called. He'd text me throughout the day from Chicago, sending pictures of conference rooms and boring hotel lobbies. I responded with heart emojis and messages about missing him, all while knowing he was probably lying in bed next to Sarah Chen. "How's the conference going?" I'd ask, my voice bright and interested. "Same old stuff. Death by PowerPoint, you know. I'll be so glad to get home." Home. The word felt like a joke now. But I played along, told him about Emma's soccer game, about the neighbor's new puppy, about mundane things that felt increasingly meaningless. When he wasn't calling, I was researching Sarah Chen online. Her LinkedIn profile showed she was indeed a marketing consultant, graduated from University of Washington, worked for several tech companies before going freelance. Her Instagram was full of artsy coffee shop photos and hiking pictures. She looked happy, carefree, probably had no idea she was dating a married man with a 12-year-old daughter. I wondered if I should contact her, tell her the truth, but Margaret had advised against it. "Let sleeping dogs lie," she'd said. "Don't give him any reason to suspect you know. The element of surprise is your biggest advantage right now." So I waited, and planned, and pretended. I researched our assets more carefully, discovered investments I'd forgotten about, insurance policies that would need to be divided, even a timeshare in Colorado Daniel had bought years ago that I'd rarely thought about. Everything had to be documented, valued, protected. The most difficult conversation was with my sister Kate. I needed someone to know what was happening, someone who could help with Emma if things got complicated. "Are you sure?" she asked when I showed her some of the evidence. We were sitting in her kitchen while our kids played in the backyard. "Maybe it's just a midlife crisis thing. Maybe you could work through it." I looked at her like she'd suggested I start breathing underwater. "Kate, look at these photos. Look at these emails. This isn't some stupid mistake. This is a whole other life he's been building." She was quiet for a long time, studying the printouts I'd brought. Finally, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Just be here. When this all comes out, Emma's going to need stability. I'm going to need help. And Daniel's probably going to try to make me look like the crazy wife who couldn't handle his success." The night before Daniel was supposed to return, I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling. Everything was ready. Margaret had the divorce papers prepared. My evidence was organized and copied. My new bank account was established. Emma's school had a flag on her file in case Daniel tried to pick her up unexpectedly. I felt like a soldier preparing for battle. Except the enemy was someone who'd promised to love me forever. Someone who'd stood at an altar 15 years ago and vowed to be faithful, honest, devoted. Someone who'd held my hand while I gave birth to his child. But that man, if he'd ever really existed, was gone. The person coming home tomorrow was a stranger who looked like my husband, and I was ready for him. Daniel's flight landed at LAX on a Thursday afternoon. I tracked it online, watched the status change from delayed to arrived, while I sat in the library helping Mrs. Rodriguez find large print romance novels. My hands were steady as I checked books in and out, answered questions about overdue fees, smiled at patrons like any other day. But inside, every nerve was vibrating with anticipation. He texted when he landed. Wheels down. Traffic looks terrible. Be home by 6 if I'm lucky. I responded with a smiley face and a heart, then went to pick up Emma from soccer practice. She bounced into the car covered in grass stains and sweat, chattering about a goal she'd almost scored and some drama between teammates. Normal 12-year-old stuff that felt precious and fragile now. Dad's coming home tonight, I told her as we drove through our suburban neighborhood. The same streets Daniel and I had walked when we first moved here, when Emma was a toddler, and we still talked about having another baby someday. Can we order Chinese food? Emma asked. You know, like a celebration? My throat tightened. Sure, honey. Whatever you want. At home, I moved through the routine like I was performing in a play. Started a load of laundry, checked Emma's homework folder, fed our golden retriever Max. Everything exactly as it should be for the returning husband and father. I even made Daniel's favorite dinner. Grilled salmon with the garlic mashed potatoes he always requested for special occasions. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, playing the perfect wife one last time for a man who'd been sending naked pictures to his girlfriend just days ago. Emma set the table with our good dishes, the ones we usually saved for holidays. She arranged flowers from our garden in a vase, proud of her contribution to welcoming Daddy home. I watched her and felt my heart break a little more. She had no idea her world was about to change. When Daniel's car pulled into the driveway at 6:15, I took a deep breath and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked normal. Tired, maybe, but normal. The woman staring back at me gave no hint that she'd spent the past week planning her husband's downfall. Daddy! Emma launched herself at him the moment he walked through the door. He caught her in a bear hug, spinning her around like he used to when she was smaller. For a second, watching them together, I almost forgot what I knew. Almost remembered why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. I missed you so much, kiddo, he said, setting her down and ruffling her hair. How's my favorite soccer star? He looked good, rested, happy even. His clothes were expensive, newer than I remembered. A watch I didn't recognize glinted on his wrist. The man returning from his business trip seemed younger somehow, energized in a way he never was after coming home to us anymore. Hey, beautiful, he said, walking over to kiss me. His lips were warm, familiar, and I had to force myself not to pull away. Smells amazing in here. You're spoiling me. Just missed you, I replied, the lie sliding out easily. How was Chicago? Productive? Long meetings, boring presentations, the usual corporate nonsense. But I think we landed some good accounts. He loosened his tie, looking around the kitchen appreciatively. This is nice. I love coming home to this. We sat down to dinner, the three of us around our kitchen table like thousands of nights before. Daniel told stories about his trip, carefully edited versions that painted him as the dedicated businessman working hard for his family. He asked Emma about school, listened to her soccer updates, helped her with a math problem she'd been struggling with. He was being the perfect dad, the attentive husband. If I hadn't seen those photos, hadn't read those emails, I might have believed this version of him was real. Maybe it had been real once, before Sarah Chen and expensive hotel rooms and secret bank accounts. After dinner, we watched a movie together on the couch. Some action thing Daniel picked while Emma fell asleep against his shoulder. I sat on his other side, his arm around me, feeling like I was observing someone else's life. This cozy family scene was about to become a memory, the last normal evening we'd ever have together. I'm exhausted, Daniel said when the credits rolled. Travel always wipes me out. I helped him carry a sleeping Emma to her room, watched him tuck her in and kiss her forehead. He was a good father. I had to admit that. Whatever else he'd become, he genuinely loved our daughter. That made what I was about to do both harder and more necessary. In our bedroom, he unpacked while telling me more details about his trip, which restaurants he'd eaten at, which colleagues he'd networked with, how the hotel's gym had been surprisingly good. All lies mixed with just enough truth to sound believable. He'd gotten very good at this double life. "I'm going to grab a quick shower," he said, pulling off his shirt. "Want to join me?" The invitation was casual, automatic, the kind of thing married couples say without thinking. But looking at him, I felt nothing but revulsion. That body had been tangled up with someone else just days ago. Those hands had touched another woman while I was home helping our daughter with homework. "I'm pretty tired too," I said. "Maybe tomorrow night." He nodded, not seeming disappointed, and headed for the bathroom. I heard the water start, heard him humming some song I didn't recognize, probably something Sarah had introduced him to. While he showered, I sat on our bed and opened my laptop. The email was already composed, sitting in my drafts folder where I'd written and rewritten it a dozen times over the past week. No subject line, no explanation, just attachments. Every photo he'd accidentally sent me, every screenshot of his emails with her, every hotel receipt and financial document I'd found. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there was no going back. No more pretending. No more playing the oblivious wife. Our marriage, our family, our entire life together would be over. The shower was still running. Daniel was probably using that expensive body wash he'd started buying recently, the one that smelled nothing like the soap he'd used for years, getting ready to slide into bed next to me, kiss me goodnight, maybe even try to initiate sex while thinking about another woman. I hit send. The email appeared in his inbox immediately. I could see it on his phone charging on the nightstand. All I had to do now was wait. Wait for him to finish his shower, get dressed, check his messages like he did every night before bed. Wait for him to realize that his secret life wasn't secret anymore. I closed the laptop and got ready for bed, brushing my teeth and washing my face like any other night. But my reflection in the bathroom mirror looked different somehow. Stronger, maybe. More awake than I'd been in years. When Daniel came out of the shower with a towel wrapped around his waist, I was sitting calmly on our bed, already in my pajamas. He grabbed his phone to check messages, the same routine he'd followed for years. I watched his face change, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his eyes go wide with horror, watched the exact moment my husband realized his world had just exploded. Daniel stared at his phone for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. I watched him scroll through the attachments, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally pure panic. His hands started shaking. "What is this?" he whispered, looking at me like I was a stranger. "How did you get these?" I didn't answer immediately, just sat there on our bed, cross-legged in my pajamas, feeling strangely calm. All the anger and hurt from the past week had crystallized into something cold and clear. I wasn't going to yell or cry or make this dramatic. I was going to be surgical. "You sent me the first ones by accident," I said quietly. "Tuesday night, around 9:30. You meant to send them to Sarah, I assume, but you hit my name instead." He looked back at the phone, scrolling to the photos that had started everything. His face went ashen. "Lisa, I can explain. This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think." I reached into my nightstand drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are divorce papers, Daniel. I've already signed them. My lawyer has copies of everything you just saw, plus quite a bit more." He dropped the phone like it had burned him. "Divorce papers? Lisa, wait. You can't just... We need to talk about this. I made a mistake, okay? A stupid, terrible mistake. But we can work through this." "A mistake?" I almost smiled. "Daniel, you've been having an affair for at least 6 months. You've been hiding money in accounts I didn't know existed. You've been lying to me every single day, planning a whole separate life that doesn't include Emma and me. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made over and over again." He sat down heavily on his side of the bed, his head in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. Real ones, I thought. though it was hard to tell anymore what was genuine with him. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "Sarah and we just connected on this project and things got out of hand. I was going to end it, I swear. I was going to tell her it was over and come home and fix things with us." "When?" I asked. "When were you planning to end it? Before or after you booked that trip to Paris she mentioned in her emails? Before or after you opened that investment account that I'm not listed on?" His face crumpled. "You read our emails?" "I read everything, Daniel. Every message, every receipt, every lie you've told me for months. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I wouldn't eventually notice you were becoming a stranger in our own house?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder somehow, like he was realizing charm and tears weren't going to work on me this time. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? The house? Fine. But Emma doesn't need to know about this. We can tell her we just grew apart, that sometimes marriages don't work out. She doesn't need to know the details." I pulled out my phone and showed him a document Margaret had prepared. "Actually, Emma's going to know exactly why her father isn't living here anymore. Not the graphic details, obviously, but the truth. That you chose to break up our family for someone else. You can't poison her against me," he said, standing up suddenly. "She's my daughter, too. I have rights." "You do. Supervised visitation, according to these papers. Every other weekend, Wednesday evenings, alternating holidays. All perfectly legal and reasonable, considering you've been living a double life for months. Oh, and child support, of course, based on your real income, not just what you've been reporting on our joint tax returns." He looked at me like I'd grown horns. "You've been planning this. All week, while I was gone. You've been planning how to destroy me. I've been planning how to protect myself and Emma. There's a difference." Daniel started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "Lisa, please. I know I screwed up. I know this looks bad. But we have 15 years together. We have a daughter, a home, a life. You can't just throw that all away." "I'm not throwing it away," I said, standing up and facing him. "You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." He stopped pacing and looked at me with something like desperation. What if I ended it with her right now? What if I called her tonight and told her it was over? What if I gave you passwords to everything, let you monitor my phone, my emails, whatever you needed? We could go to counseling, work through this together. For just a second, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked so lost, so panicked. This was probably the first time in months he wasn't in control of the narrative, wasn't able to charm or manipulate his way out of consequences. "It's too late for that," I said quietly. "Even if I believed you'd actually change, which I don't, I can't trust you anymore. Every business trip, every late night, every time you touch me, I'll be wondering if you're lying. I'll be checking your phone, questioning everything you say. That's not a marriage, Daniel. That's a prison sentence." He sank back down on the bed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "So that's it? 15 years? And you're just done?" "I'm done with being married to someone who lies to me every day. I'm done pretending not to notice that you check out of our life every time you get a text. I'm done feeling like I'm not enough for the man who promised to love me forever." We sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear Emma's fan running in her room down the hall, the normal sounds of our house settling for the night. Tomorrow, everything would be different. She'd wake up to a broken family and a father who didn't live here anymore. "I do love you," Daniel said finally. "Maybe that's hard to believe right now, but I do. I love Emma too, more than anything." "I know you do," I replied, and I meant it. That's what makes this so sad. You had everything you said you wanted. A wife who loved you, a beautiful daughter, a good home, and you threw it away for what? Excitement? Novelty? The thrill of sneaking around? He didn't have an answer for that. "I need you to pack a bag and leave tonight," I said. "You can stay at your brother's place or get a hotel. I don't care where. But I won't have Emma waking up to a house full of tension and arguments. She deserves better than that." "What am I supposed to tell her?" "The truth. That you made choices that hurt our family, and now we have to figure out a new way to live. She's not stupid, Daniel. She's been watching us barely talk to each other for months. She knows something's been wrong." He packed slowly. like each item he put in his suitcase made everything more real. I watched him choose clothes and toiletries, wondering what he'd tell Sarah about why he was suddenly available to spend more time with her, whether this would make their relationship stronger, or if she'd run when she realized he came with this much baggage. At the bedroom door, he turned back to me. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry. You didn't deserve this." "No," I agreed. "I didn't. But Emma and I will be okay. Better than okay, actually. We'll be honest with each other, which is more than I can say about us." After he left, I sat in our suddenly quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The pretending was over. The wondering and suspecting and second-guessing myself was done. Whatever came next, at least it would be real. Emma found me in the kitchen the next morning, making coffee and staring out the window at our backyard. She was dressed for school but moving slowly, the way kids do when they sense something's different in their world. "Where's Dad?" she asked, opening the refrigerator and pulling out orange juice. His car wasn't in the garage. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times, but sitting across from my daughter at our breakfast table, all my careful words seemed inadequate. "Honey, sit down. We need to talk." The look on her face told me she already knew this wasn't going to be good news. She was 12, old enough to understand that parents who need to talk usually meant her world was about to change. I told her as gently as I could that Dad and I were getting divorced, that he'd made some choices that hurt our family, that it wasn't her fault, and had nothing to do with how much we both loved her. She listened quietly, asking only a few questions, and cried just a little before asking if she could still play soccer this season. "Of course you can," I said, hugging her tight. "Nothing about your life is going to change except Dad won't be living here anymore. You'll still see him, still do all the things you love, I promise." The conversation with our families was harder. Daniel's parents called me that afternoon, confused and angry after he'd shown up at their house with a suitcase and a story about us having problems. I gave them the basic facts without going into details about Sarah or the financial deception. Let them draw their own conclusions about their son's behavior. My own parents were more supportive, but kept asking if I was sure I didn't want to try counseling first. "Marriages go through rough patches," my mother said. "Maybe this is just a phase he's going through." I didn't bother explaining that 15-year marriages don't usually include secret girlfriends and hidden bank accounts. Some people needed to learn about Daniel's true character gradually. I was done being his publicist. The legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Margaret was efficient and thorough, making sure every asset was accounted for and fairly divided. Daniel's lawyer tried to negotiate, but the evidence was overwhelming. The separate accounts, the financial secrecy, the documentation of his affair, it all painted a clear picture of a man who'd been planning his exit while pretending to be a devoted husband. Within 6 weeks, Daniel had moved into a downtown apartment, and we were legally separated. He tried to maintain his relationship with Emma, picking her up for dinner every Wednesday and taking her for weekends when he didn't have business trips that I now knew were romantic getaways. Emma handled it better than I'd expected. She was sad, of course, and angry sometimes, but she was also remarkably resilient. Kids adapt faster than adults, I learned. She made friends with other kids in her class whose parents were divorced, joined a support group at school, and threw herself into soccer with even more determination. "I'm glad you're happier now, Mom," she told me one evening while we were making dinner together. "You smile more than you used to." I hadn't realized it had been that obvious, but she was right. The constant tension of living with someone who was essentially a stranger pretending to be my husband was gone. I felt lighter, more like myself than I had in years. I started taking classes at the community college, something I'd wanted to do for years but never had time for when I was managing Daniel's schedule and social obligations. Photography, of all things. It turned out I had an eye for it, a way of capturing moments that felt honest and real. The house felt different with just Emma and me, quieter, but also more peaceful. We established new routines, new traditions. Movie nights on Friday, pancake breakfasts on Sunday, walks with Max through the neighborhood where I'd started noticing things I'd missed before. The way morning light hit certain windows, how the elderly couple down the street held hands during their daily walks. Daniel's relationship with Sarah became public knowledge within a few months. They were spotted at restaurants around town, and someone who knew someone who worked at his company confirmed they were officially dating. Part of me wondered if it would last now that it wasn't forbidden and exciting anymore, now that he came with the complications of an ex-wife and child support payments. I felt sorry for her sometimes. She was getting a man who'd proven he could lie expertly for months, could maintain elaborate deceptions while looking you in the eye and promising he loved you. Maybe she thought she was special, that he'd never do to her what he'd done to me. Maybe she was right, but I doubted it. The hardest part was watching Emma navigate having a part-time father. Daniel tried to make their limited time together special, taking her to expensive dinners and buying her things I couldn't afford. But she was smart enough to see through the guilt gifts, mature enough to understand that being a good parent was about consistency and presence, not grand gestures and shopping trips. "Dad feels bad," she told me one Sunday evening after he'd dropped her off from their weekend together. "He keeps apologizing and asking if I'm okay with everything. I told him I'm fine, but I think he needs me to be sadder than I am." I was proud of her emotional intelligence, proud of how she was handling an impossible situation with more grace than most adults would manage. She was going to be okay. Better than okay. She was learning lessons about honesty and integrity that would serve her well for the rest of her life. A year later, sitting in my own apartment, we decided to sell the house and start fresh somewhere smaller. I looked through photos from our old life, birthday parties and Christmas mornings, family vacations and ordinary Tuesday evenings. In almost every picture, Daniel and I looked happy together. But now I could see what I'd missed at the time. How his smiles never quite reached his eyes in the later photos. How I'd unconsciously started standing a little apart from him. How we'd both been going through the motions of being a family without really connecting. The woman in those photos had been sleepwalking through her own life, accepting less and less from her marriage while telling herself everything was fine. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone who knew her own worth, who wouldn't settle for half-truths and hollow promises. Emma bounded into the room, home from her first day of 8th grade, full of stories about new teachers and classes. She looked taller somehow, more confident. Like me, she was blooming in the aftermath of our family's destruction. We'd both learned that sometimes the end of something familiar was actually the beginning of something better. "How was your day?" I asked, the same question I'd been asking her for years. But now I knew I'd actually listen to the answer, really be present for whatever she wanted to tell me. That was the gift Daniel's betrayal had given us both, the chance to build something real and honest from the ruins of something that had been fake for far too long.